parents, what's the funniest lie your kid ever told? Story 1. My son, who was about 5 at the time, came up with a story that had me laughing for days. We were at the grocery store, and he was holding my hand as we walked down the aisles. Out of nowhere, he turned to me, his face all serious, and said, "Mom, I have a secret to tell you." I bent down, curious. "What is it, sweetie?" I asked. He looked around to make sure no one was listening and whispered, "I'm actually Batman and I can't let anyone know." I couldn't help but giggle, but he continued with the most serious face. "That's why I don't have a cape. It's invisible." He then walked off with a proud smile like he just told me the most important secret of all time. Now, every time I see him trying to do something a little risky, I remind him, "Don't forget, Batman, you have to be careful." Story 2. My daughter, who was 6, told me she saw a unicorn in the backyard. I asked her to describe it, and she said it had purple wings and was eating grass, but also it could speak. I, of course, didn't believe her and said, "Unicorns aren't real, honey." She stared at me for a moment, then very seriously said, "Oh, but this one is special. It was just visiting. I've been helping it learn to speak human words." She then added, "I think it's a little embarrassed because it doesn't know the word for bread in English yet, but it's trying." I still have no idea where she got the idea of a talking, embarrassed unicorn, but I spent the rest of the day keeping an eye out for one in case it ever returned. Story 3. My son, who's 10 now, went through a phase where he was really into superheroes, specifically Spider-Man. One evening, after we had finished dinner, he came up to me and said, "Mom, I think I figured it out. I have Spider-Man's powers." I asked him how he knew this, and he explained, "Well, my hands don't stick to walls, but I've been practicing and using my imagination to pretend. That's basically the same thing, right?" He then proceeded to web sling from one piece of furniture to the next in our living room, knocking over a few things in the process. "I think I need to work on my technique," he said, dusting himself off. Needless to say, I couldn't stop laughing, and made sure to tell him that Spider-Man definitely had a lot more to learn about controlling his powers. Story 4. When my son was about 4, he came home from preschool with a big smile on his face. I asked him how his day went, and he said, "I made a new friend today. His name is Bob, and he's a dragon." Now, I was trying to process what he was saying when he added, "He lives in my backpack, but he doesn't breathe fire anymore. He used to, but he got in trouble with the teacher, so now he just eats snacks." I asked him if Bob was real, and he nodded enthusiastically. "He only comes out when nobody's looking," he explained, "but sometimes I let him eat my snacks when I'm hungry. He doesn't mind sharing." The best part? The next day, I found him sitting in the corner of the living room, whispering to his backpack. I don't know what was more unbelievable, the dragon or the fact that I now had to buy him snacks for his imaginary friend. Story 5. My daughter, who was 5 at the time, came running up to me one day, her eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, guess what? I saw a mermaid in the pool." I looked at her and said, "Sweetie, mermaids are just in stories. There's no way a mermaid was in the pool." She looked at me with a "you're so clueless" expression and said, "Well, she wasn't swimming. She was sunbathing on the edge, wearing sunglasses. She had purple hair, and she said she was on vacation from the ocean." She paused dramatically before adding, "She also said she likes swimming in the pool better because there are no sharks here." I didn't know whether to laugh or be concerned. She was so convincing that I half expected a mermaid with sunglasses to pop up at any moment. Story 6. One of the funniest lies my kid ever told happened when my son was just 7. He had a huge fascination with space and would often talk about how he was going to become an astronaut. One evening, after his bath, he casually mentioned that he had already been to the moon. "What?" I said, thinking he was joking. "Yeah," he said, nonchalantly. "I went there last night while you were sleeping. I rode my space scooter." He then proceeded to explain in great detail how his space scooter worked, how it ran on moon dust, and how it could travel at the speed of light. I was trying not to laugh, so I played along and asked, "So what did you do when you were on the moon?" He said, "Well, I had to make sure the aliens there were nice, so I gave them a present, a rock from Earth. But they didn't want it, so I had to trade it for a moon cheese sandwich instead." He was so serious about it that I couldn't help but just nod, amazed at how far his imagination had taken him. After that, every night before bed, I'd ask him if he was planning any more trips to the moon, and he'd give me an exaggerated wink, like he had a top-secret mission. To this day, I still wonder what kind of adventures he's having when I'm not around. Story 7. When my daughter was about 4, she came to me one morning with a proud look on her face. "Guess what, Mom?" she said, tugging at my sleeve. "I'm the queen of the backyard." I raised an eyebrow, asking her how she became queen. She told me that the night before, she had gone out to the backyard and made a royal decree, commanding all the squirrels, birds, and even the neighbor's dog to bow to her. They all listened, she added confidently. I even made a squirrel crown out of sticks and leaves. I tried to keep my composure and asked her how she got the animals to obey. She leaned in closer and whispered, "I used my magic powers, of course. I have special squirrel whispering powers that no one else has. She then proceeded to describe how she had convinced the dog to wear a royal collar made of flowers and how the birds sang her praises. The best part was when she told me that her rule would last until the next full moon. When I asked her if she was planning to give up her title anytime soon, she simply said, "Only if I find a better kingdom to rule." Needless to say, I didn't argue with the queen of the backyard, and from that day on, every time I saw a squirrel, I would jokingly bow in her honor. Story 8. My son, who was 10 at the time, told me the most elaborate and unbelievable story once when he was asked about what he did over the weekend. He went on and on about how he had spent the whole Saturday helping out his super-secret agent friend, who, according to him, was a spy for the government. He told me not to tell anyone, my son said dramatically, "But I have to, because you're my mom, and I trust you." Naturally, I was intrigued, so I asked him more about his secret agent friend. "Well," he continued, "we had to sneak into a villain's hideout to stop him from taking over the world. The villain was an evil scientist who was trying to turn all the broccoli in the world into giant mutant trees." I burst out laughing, but my son didn't crack a smile. He was dead serious. "We had to wear disguises, Mom. That's why you didn't see me all weekend. I was undercover." He went on to explain how they had to solve puzzles to get into the villain's lair, and how, at one point, they had to use a laser beam, which turned out to be a flashlight, to disarm a trap. He then dramatically added, "And we saved the broccoli. It was a close call, but we made it out just in time." I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "That's amazing. I didn't know you had such a dangerous weekend." His reply, "Well, yeah, but it's top secret. You can't tell anyone, or the villain will come after us. We have to stay low-key for a while." From that point on, I started calling him Agent Broccoli for the next few months, much to his embarrassment. Story 9. My daughter once told me that she could talk to animals, and it wasn't just a casual claim. It was a full-blown explanation. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch, she suddenly stood up, looked at me with wide eyes, and said, "Mom, I have something important to tell you. I'm the leader of the neighborhood birds." I was confused, so I asked her what she meant by that. She looked at me as if I were out of my mind for not understanding already. "I can talk to them, and they listen to me. I've been telling them what to do for weeks." When I asked how this all began, she said, "Well, one day, I just started talking to them, and they understood me. I told them to bring me shiny things, and now they do it every time. I even taught them a new song." She explained that, because she had been so nice to them, the birds now had a secret alliance with her. "If anyone tries to mess with my house or my toys," she told me seriously, "the birds will swoop down and warn me. They're my personal bodyguards." At that point, I almost started asking for proof, but I stopped myself because she sounded so convincing. Later, she brought me a tiny, shiny rock she'd found in the yard, claiming that one of her bird friends had left it for her as a gift. I still have no idea where she got it, but I've never looked at the birds in the neighborhood the same way again. Story 10. My youngest daughter, who was 6, once told me she was a time traveler. She said that one night, while she was sleeping, she had traveled to the future and saw herself as an adult. "Mom," she began, "I know what I'm going to be when I grow up. I saw it in the future. I'm going to be a famous explorer." I was wearing this cool suit, and I had a spaceship that looked like a giant donut. Of course, I was curious and asked her how she managed to time travel. She looked at me seriously and explained, "I used my special time travel watch. It only works when you wear it in bed and close your eyes really tight." She even told me that she had seen her future self explore planets and fight off giant robots. With a toy sword, of course. I was genuinely curious, so I asked her more about the future, but she quickly got defensive. "You can't come with me, Mom. Time travel is really dangerous, and the future is a secret." Then she added, "But don't worry, I'll bring you a souvenir when I'm famous. Maybe a moon rock or a pet dinosaur." To this day, she still insists she traveled to the future and has been keeping an eye on her future self. I'm still waiting for that moon rock. Story 11. One day, my 8-year-old daughter came to me and, with a completely serious face, said, "Mom, I need to tell you something important." I braced myself for one of her usual exaggerated stories, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "I've been to another dimension," she said, as if it were no big deal. I raised an eyebrow and asked her to explain. She sat down and began, "Last week, while I was asleep, I got pulled through a portal in my dream. I was in a world where everything was made of candy." She then told me that in this candy world, she was the leader of a group of gummy bears, and they had a mission: to protect the chocolate rivers from the evil sour worms who tried to poison the water. She was so vivid in her description, detailing how she flew around on a licorice broomstick, patrolling the rivers and fighting off the sour worms. "I have the powers of a candy queen," she added, "but I can only use them in the candy dimension." She swore to me that it was real, and even claimed that she had brought back a souvenir, a small, shiny piece of time candy that supposedly allowed her to visit again. I still have no idea where that candy came from, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't from any store. After that, every time I found her looking at a piece of candy with deep concentration, I would half-jokingly ask her, "Are you planning your next adventure?" She'd wink and reply, "Don't worry, I've got it under control." Story 12. My son, who is 9, came to me one afternoon with the most serious look on his face. He had just gotten home from school and I could tell something was on his mind. "Mom," he said, "I've decided I'm going to start my own country." Naturally, I was curious, so I asked him about his plans. He looked at me, as if I should have known this was coming. "I've been thinking about it for weeks and I've got everything figured out," he said, holding up a piece of paper. "This is the flag." The flag was drawn in bright crayon colors with a huge smiley face in the center. "The country's name is Smileyland, and everyone has to smile all the time," he explained. "If you stop smiling, you have to go to the Smile Rehabilitation Center, where you watch funny videos until you start smiling again." According to him, he would be the ruler, and all citizens would get free ice cream every Friday. I couldn't help but laugh. So I asked him how he planned to make this country a reality. He replied, "Easy, Mom. I'm going to start by claiming my treehouse as the headquarters. I'll send out invitations to all my friends, and we'll start with one rule: no frowning allowed." He then proudly announced that he had already appointed his best friend as the Chief Happiness Officer. After hearing this, I made sure to tell him he could always count on me to help him build his country, though I wasn't sure how far his Smileyland would get with the local HOA. Story 13. A few weeks ago, my 6-year-old son came up to me with the most deadpan expression. "Mom, you know how I always ask for snacks right after dinner?" he began. "Well, I have a secret. I had a feeling I was in for something ridiculous, but I was curious. So I asked him to spill the beans." He looked around to make sure no one was listening before saying, "I'm actually a snack agent for a top-secret organization." I blinked, unsure of where this was going. He went on to explain that his job was to monitor snack supplies worldwide and ensure that the snacks are evenly distributed and always fresh. He told me that when I sent him to bed early, he was actually getting briefed by his snack team, which, according to him, consisted of some very serious-looking animals like squirrels and rabbits. "That's why I can't eat all the snacks you give me right away," he explained, "because I have to ration them out for the greater good." He even said that his secret snack agency had an emergency stash hidden in the garage, in case there was ever a snack shortage crisis. The best part? He told me that his training for this job started when he was a baby, and that's why he always seemed to know exactly when snacks were ready. At this point, I asked him, "So, if you're a secret snack agent, does that mean you can't eat cookies without permission?" He gave me a sly look and said, "Only if it's an emergency." I still haven't figured out whether to be proud or concerned, but it certainly explains why he always magically knows when there are snacks. Story 14. My daughter, who's 7, came up to me one afternoon looking very serious. "Mom, I need to tell you something. You've been living a lie." I was startled and asked her what she meant. She said, "I have superpowers, but I can't show you them yet because they're too powerful." I tried to suppress a laugh, but she was adamant. "I can control the weather, Mom. I can make it rain or sunny, or even create a tornado if I want." She went on to explain that she had discovered her abilities while on a family vacation. "When we were at the beach, I made the waves bigger so I could ride them, but I had to stop before anyone noticed," she said. Then she added, "I can also make it snow, but only if I concentrate really hard, and I haven't tried it yet because it's too dangerous." I played along and asked her how she learned to control these powers. "I found an ancient weather scroll in the attic," she said, "but I only read part of it because I didn't want to be overwhelmed with too much power." She then told me that she had created her own weather agency in her room and was working on perfecting her lightning bolt technique. At the end of our conversation, she made me promise not to tell anyone because it was top secret. I didn't ask her if she was secretly causing the storm clouds every time she was in a bad mood, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Story 15. When my son was 7, he came up to me one night, very wide-eyed, and said, "Mom, I've been to the future and I know exactly what's going to happen in the next 100 years." I almost didn't take him seriously, but he was so confident that I was intrigued. He started telling me about how in the future there were flying cars and robots did all the work. "I was there with my future self," he explained, and he took me on a tour of the future. Apparently, his future self had a flying car shaped like a giant potato. I have no idea where he got that idea from. "We went to the future amusement park," he continued, "where you could ride on time machines, but you had to be careful not to mess up the timeline. One time, I accidentally gave someone the wrong directions, and it almost changed the whole world." He was so serious about it, I started to wonder if he'd really had some sort of weird dream, or if he was just making things up. He concluded by saying, "I also learned that in the future, everyone will have a pet robot. I'm getting mine next week." Of course, I asked him if I would be getting one too, and he replied, "I can't say, but I'll send you a postcard from the future. I'm still waiting for that postcard, and I wonder if he's right about those flying cars. Story 16. When my son was 6, he came running into the kitchen one afternoon with wide eyes. He had that look of excitement you can't ignore. "Mom, guess what?" he asked. I leaned over, expecting a funny story or something random, but instead he said, "I can talk to dinosaurs." I blinked at him, thinking maybe he meant he liked dinosaurs, or had seen one on TV. But no, he was completely serious. "I'm friends with a T. Rex named Tim. He's really nice once you get to know him." I was skeptical, but wanted to know more, so I asked him to tell me how this friendship started. He went on to explain that he had met Tim through an underground dinosaur club, and they communicated using a secret dinosaur language that only the club members could understand. They speak through roars, but not just any. "You have to make the happy roar, or they think you're a threat," he said. He even added that Tim had taught him how to walk like a dinosaur by stomping really loud, but only in the backyard because it was too noisy inside the house. "I'm actually part of their dinosaur squad," he said proudly. "We're responsible for making sure the garden stays safe from the evil robot bugs that live underground." I laughed, but he was so convincing that I almost believed him. He even gave me a dinosaur communication signal to use, which involved making a specific hand gesture and stomping my foot. To this day, I sometimes see him outside, whispering to the trees, and I wonder if Tim's still out there somewhere, watching over the garden. Story 17. My daughter was in a particularly imaginative phase when she was 8. One day she came to me with a big, serious frown and said, "Mom, you won't believe what happened at school today." I assumed it was a typical story about school drama. But this was far beyond what I expected. "I had to save my whole class from a time traveler," she said. "He tried to erase the entire afternoon from history." I was trying to hold back my laughter, but she was completely earnest. She went on to explain that the time traveler had shown up in her math class, claiming he needed to stop them from learning too much about ancient number systems because it would ruin the future. "He had this weird machine that looked like a toaster, and it made everything go all wibbly," she said. "So I had to use my magic pencil to fix it." She described how she pulled out her special pencil, which was just a regular pink eraser pencil, but she insisted it had mystical powers, and drew a line across the time traveler's machine. I erased the part that made time wobble, and then I froze him in place with the magic of the pencil. "But I had to be quick, or we'd have no future." "Of course," she added. "I'm not allowed to tell anyone about the time traveler because if they find out, he might try again. But don't worry. I'll always be there to stop him." After hearing this, I couldn't help but chuckle at how seriously she took her role as the protector of time. I made sure to keep a close eye on any random toasters showing up in the house, just in case. Story 18. When my son turned 5, he suddenly developed a very interesting idea. He was a superhero with a secret identity. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of playing outside, he came to me and, in his most mysterious voice, told me, "Mom, I have something to tell you. I'm actually Superman, and I've been hiding it from you." I raised an eyebrow, and he continued, "I've been trying to keep it a secret because my cape is too cool, and I don't want the bad guys to know where I live." I decided to humor, so I asked, "Okay, Superman, what's your superpower?" Without missing a beat, he replied, "I can turn invisible." I blinked. "Really?" I asked, pretending to be amazed. "Show me." He immediately crouched behind the couch, making no effort to hide his giggling. "You can't see me, right?" he whispered from behind the couch. "I'm invisible." I could hardly keep a straight face as he peered out from behind his hiding spot, his eyes shining with excitement. "See? You can't see me because I'm so invisible, Mom." I played along, saying, "Wow, you really are invisible." Then, he proceeded to spend the next half hour attempting to sneak around the house, pausing to dramatically announce that he had disappeared. The best part? He refused to take off his superhero costume at bedtime because, as he put it, you never know when a villain might show up. I need to be ready at all times. It took me a few weeks to convince him that maybe, just maybe, his cape wasn't actually making him invisible, but to this day, he still insists he's secretly a superhero, ready to save the world from wherever he is. Story 19. My daughter had always been a very creative child, but when she was 7, she came up with an elaborate story that left me absolutely stunned. One evening, as we were preparing for dinner, she pulled me aside with a solemn look. "Mom," she began, "I need to tell you something important. I was a pirate in my past life." At first I thought she was joking, but she continued with complete seriousness. "I used to sail the seas and find treasure. My pirate name was Captain Rose, and I had the best crew ever." She went on to explain that her ship, called the Stormy Sea, was a giant floating fortress made of wood and gold. I was the bravest pirate, and I fought off sea monsters and other pirates who wanted to steal my treasure. She even added that, in her past life, she had a parrot named Mr. Silas Squawks who would give her advice on where to find treasure. He was very wise for a parrot, she said, and he always knew where the best loot was hidden. I played along, asking her how she could remember all of this. She shrugged and said, I just know, Mom. I dream about it sometimes and it all comes back to me. As she went on with her story, describing her pirate ship and the treasures she had buried on distant islands, I couldn't help but be impressed by how detailed she was. The best part? She swore that someday when she was older, she would set sail and find those treasures again. I secretly hoped I wouldn't find a treasure chest buried in the backyard, but if I did, I'd be ready to join her on her next big adventure. Story 20. A few months ago, my son, who was then 6, came up to me, grinning from ear to ear. Mom, I have some important news, he said in his best serious voice. I'm secretly a wizard, and I've been using magic to help around the house. At first, I thought it was just another one of his imaginative stories, but he was so confident that I listened closely. I've been using my wand to make your coffee in the morning, he said. That's why you always think it's perfect, because I made it with magic. I burst out laughing, but he didn't break character. And I've been fixing all the broken toys in your room with my magic spell, he continued. That's why you never notice when they get fixed. I asked him how he learned to use magic, and he proudly told me, well, one night I found this really old spell book under my bed, and I've been practicing my spells ever since. I'm really good at it now. According to him, he had learned how to make objects float, make things disappear, and even turn socks into magical slippers. He even claimed he could cast a spell that would make his cereal taste better. It's the best kind of magic, he said, because I can use it to make things more fun. At this point, I was half convinced he had some magical power. After all, he was able to make chores seem a little less annoying when he claimed to have enchanted them. I joked with him that if he ever needed an apprentice, I'd be happy to help. His reply? You're already my best student, Mom. Story 21. One day, my daughter, who was 9 at the time, came running into the living room, eyes wide with excitement. Mom, I have a big secret to tell you, she exclaimed, practically jumping up and down. Naturally, I braced myself for one of her usual exaggerations, but this one was different. She took a deep breath, as if preparing to share a top-secret mission, and said, I'm a time traveler. I gave her a curious look, and she continued without missing a beat. I've been traveling through time for the past few weeks. I know how to get to the future and the past. But I've been hiding it from you because I'm not supposed to let anyone know. My heart skipped a beat as I tried to comprehend what she was saying, but she was so confident. You see, I have a special watch, she explained. It looks just like a regular wristwatch, but it has a time button that lets me go anywhere. I've been to the year 3000, and I've seen hoverboards and flying cars. She told me that in the future, animals could talk, and that people no longer needed sleep because they had dream generators to recharge their minds while they were awake. But Mom, I haven't told you about the most important thing, she said with a look of pure excitement. I've met my future self. I'm going to be an inventor. According to her, her future self showed her all the gadgets and devices she had created, some of which were already in use in the year 3000, like a self-cleaning house and shoes that could walk you anywhere without moving your legs. The thing that struck me most was how detailed she was in describing the future, even telling me how the air smelled better and how the sky was clearer. When I asked her how she learned to use the time travel watch, she said, I found it in the attic one day. I've been practicing with it, but you're not supposed to use it too much, or the timeline could get messed up. I played along and asked her what the biggest challenge of being a time traveler was. She looked serious for a moment and then said, well, sometimes I accidentally change things, like how you never wanted me to eat pizza on a Tuesday. In the future, everyone eats pizza on Tuesdays, so now it's a tradition. After that conversation, I couldn't look at her watch the same way again. Sometimes I'll catch her staring off into space as if she's deep in thought about her next time travel adventure. It makes me wonder where or when she's going next. Story 22. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon when my 7-year-old son came running up to me with a twinkle in his eye. Mom, I have a secret, he whispered, leaning in close as if he was about to reveal some world-shattering news. I smiled, thinking he was about to tell me something silly, but what came next was anything but. I'm actually a robot, he said, his voice full of conviction. I was sent here to learn about humans, but I forgot to tell you. I have a special robot battery inside me, and I have to charge every night to keep my power levels up. At first, I thought he was just joking, but his demeanor was so serious that I decided to play along. Okay, I said. Tell me more about your robot life. What can you do? He grinned like he had been waiting for me to ask this very question. Well, first of all, he said, I have super strength, but I have to be careful because I don't want to break anything. I also have laser eyes, but I can only use them when no one's looking. That's why I wear these special glasses to disguise my powers. He then went on to tell me that he had come to Earth to study human behavior, specifically how humans reacted to different foods. That's why I eat so many snacks, he said. I'm studying how humans feel about. I've learned that you love chips, And I have learned that your favorite chips are nacho cheese. I couldn't help but laugh at how deeply he was invested in this robot mission. He even told me that sometimes when he needed to recharge, he would sit on the couch and pretend to be watching TV. But really, he was recharging his internal circuits through the sofa. I'm also a secret agent, he added. My job is to protect you from the aliens, but I can't tell you too much because it's classified. At this point, I was struggling to keep a straight face. So you're a robot secret agent who loves snacks? I asked. He nodded enthusiastically. Yep, that's right. And when I'm not on secret missions, I'm just a regular kid who goes to school. But sometimes I have to take off my human disguise and go back to my spaceship for maintenance. I played along and asked, what does your spaceship look like? He thought for a moment and said, it's shaped like a giant cupcake, because cupcakes are the best thing in the galaxy. But don't tell anyone. It's a secret. From that day on, every time he got a snack, I'd jokingly ask, is this part of your robot mission? He'd just smile and say, yes, I'm making great progress. Story 23. My daughter, who was 10, was always full of ideas, but one afternoon, she really outdid herself. Mom, I have something to confess, she said, looking at me with a mixture of excitement and concern. I'm actually a professional treasure hunter. At first, I thought she was joking, but she was absolutely serious. I've been hunting treasure all over the world. I've even been to the pyramids in Egypt and to the lost city of Atlantis. I blinked in disbelief, and she continued without hesitation. But I had to keep it secret because my treasure hunting club is very exclusive, and we don't let people know about our missions unless they're ready to join. She explained that she was part of a secret group of young adventurers who found ancient artifacts and hidden treasures. We travel to secret locations and we have to solve riddles and puzzles to find the treasure, she said. I found gold coins, jewels, and even a rare dinosaur fossil in a cave in Peru. She went on to describe how her team used special treasure maps that were passed down from ancient explorers and how they had to navigate through hidden tunnels to avoid traps set by treasure guardians. According to her, the lost city of Atlantis was real, and she had been there on one of her missions. The city is underwater, but it's perfectly preserved. There are mermaids and giant sea turtles guarding it. I had to use my special breathing mask to go down and find the treasure chest, she explained. She went on to describe the chest in great detail, saying that it contained a mystical stone that could control the tides. But I had to leave it there because the Atlantis Guardian said it wasn't time for humanity to have that kind of power yet. At this point, I was hooked. She told me that her adventures were far from over, and that one day, she would take me on a treasure hunt of my own. I couldn't help but wonder if there was some truth to her story or if she was just weaving the best fictional tale I'd ever heard. Regardless, I promised her that the next time she needed an assistant for a treasure hunt, I was in. It wasn't every day that a mother got to go on a world-spanning adventure. Story 24. When my son was 6, he came home from kindergarten one afternoon and immediately told me that he needed to speak with me. Mom, he said, I've got something important to tell you. I've been a secret agent for the past month. At first, I assumed he was joking, but he was so serious that I didn't want to dismiss it. What kind of secret agent? I asked, trying to keep a straight face. I'm a spy for the Intergalactic Council, he said. My job is to protect the Earth from evil aliens who are trying to invade. He went on to explain that every morning, he would get up early and sneak around the house to gather intel on potential alien threats. I have a special gadget that can detect alien life, he explained, but I have to be careful not to let them know I'm onto them. According to him, there were alien spies living in the neighborhood disguised as normal people, and it was his mission to stop them. I've been keeping an eye on Mr. Thompson down the street, he said, because he looks suspicious. He always wears that weird hat, and he has a lot of antennas in his backyard. My son even told me that his friends were also part of this secret spy team, and they would meet in the park after school to discuss their findings. We use walkie-talkies to communicate, he said, but we have to use code names so the aliens can't understand us. My code name is Agent Thunderstorm. When I asked how he managed to keep his identity secret, he told me, I wear a disguise when I go out. That's why you never see me in the neighborhood without my sunglasses and hat. I have to blend in. The best part? He claimed that every night when he went to sleep, he would receive secret mission updates from the Intergalactic Council in his dreams. I didn't know whether to laugh or be impressed, but the next time I saw Mr. Thompson, I couldn't help but wonder if he was really an alien. Story 25. It was a typical Saturday afternoon when my 6-year-old daughter came to me with a serious expression, holding a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. Mom, I need to talk to you about something, she said, in a tone that suggested she had just discovered a major truth about the world. I'm a witch, she continued with all the certainty in the world. I blinked at her, not sure if I had heard that correct. A what? I asked, trying to hide the smile that was creeping onto my face. A witch, she repeated, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I'm in training though, so I haven't perfected all my powers yet. But I've already done a few spells. She then proceeded to explain that she had discovered her powers one day while playing outside. According to her, she had accidentally turned her neighbor's cat into a pumpkin. It was supposed to be a magic apple, but I made a mistake and turned it into a pumpkin, she said, shrugging as if that wasn't a big deal. I had to wait for it to turn back, and I used the reverse spell to fix it. She told me that her witch teacher was an old lady who lived in the forest behind our house, though she wasn't supposed to tell anyone about her. She gave me this magic book, my daughter said, holding up the crumpled paper. It's a spell book, but it's top secret, so you can't tell anyone. She then described a whole series of witchy activities she had been practicing, from brewing potions out of herbs in the backyard to flying on a broom, though she admitted she hadn't quite mastered that one yet. At this point, I was thoroughly amused and asked her if she could show me one of her spells. She squinted her eyes, concentrating hard. I can make you invisible, she said, but it only works when you're sitting still. She pointed her finger at me and said something that sounded suspiciously like a gibberish chant. Okay, now try to move, she said eagerly. I wiggled my fingers. Nothing happened, she pouted. It's okay, she said. I'll work on it. You just wait until I can turn myself into a frog. I'm still waiting for that frog transformation to happen, but honestly, I'm pretty sure she might be onto something. Story 26. One evening, my 8-year-old son came to me with a worried look on his face. Mom, he said, taking a deep breath, I have something important to tell you. I was a bit concerned, but I listened. I'm actually a secret agent, he said, eyes wide with excitement. But I've been hiding it from you because it's so top secret. I blinked, waiting for him to go on, thinking maybe this was just an elaborate story. I work for a special agency that saves the world, he continued. You know all those superhero movies you watch? Well, I'm one of those superheroes, but I don't wear a cape. My superhero name is Agent Eagle. I work undercover. At this point, I was both impressed and curious. What's your mission, Agent Eagle? I asked, playing along. Well, there's a group of evil villains who are trying to take over the world, and they're trying to steal all the chocolate, he said, nodding seriously. I've been stopping them for years. They were planning to launch a giant chocolate-stealing robot, but I broke into their lair and stole the plans. Now I'm on the run from them, but I can't let you know where I'm hiding out. I tried not to laugh as he continued. They also have a pet cat that's been trained to steal candy, and I've been working on a new invention to catch it. It's a candy trap that only works when you sing the secret agent song. At this point, I asked him how he was trained to be such a skilled secret agent. Well, he said, looking thoughtful, when I was 3, they gave me a special spy training program. I had to pass a few tests, like running through mazes, solving puzzles, and seeing if I could catch a ball while wearing a blindfold. And I passed with flying colors. I asked if he had a special gadget, and he pulled out a little notebook and a pen, which he insisted were spy gadgets. I can make invisible ink with this pen, he whispered, but it only works if I write in it backwards. I haven't mastered it yet, but I'll be ready for my next mission soon. As he walked away, he turned and gave me a wink. Don't worry, Mom. I'll save the world, and I promise I'll always come home for dinner. Needless to say, I've been keeping a close eye on our chocolate stash ever since. Story 27. When my son was 5, he had the most outrageous idea that kept him entertained for weeks. One afternoon, he came to me very seriously and said, Mom, I need to tell you something that's been bothering. I sat down with him, curious about what could be bothering him. I'm not just a regular kid, he began. I'm actually a dragon. I stared at him, blinking, not sure whether to laugh or be concerned. What? I said, trying to wrap my mind around it. He nodded earnest. I'm a dragon, and I've been living in disguise as a human so no one would know. He then went on to explain that, as a dragon, he had magical power, including the ability to breathe fire and fly. I'm still learning how to fly, he said, but I can control fire now. That's why I'm always so warm. I just have to be careful not to burn anything. At this point, I asked him how he figured out he was a dragon. Well, one day I was playing outside and I felt this heat in my chest. And when I looked, I saw fire coming out of my mouth. But I didn't burn anything, so I knew I was a fire-breathing dragon. He added, I'm also part of a dragon clan, and we live in the mountains. I used to live there, but I came to Earth for a mission. When I asked him what his mission was, he explained, I have to protect the world from bad dragons. There are some dragons who want to take over everything, but I've been hiding my powers so they wouldn't find me. I then asked him how dragons communicate, and he replied, we can talk to each other through thoughts, but we also make really cool roaring noises. And sometimes we give each other gifts. My clan sent me a dragon crystal, but I can't show it to you yet because it's too powerful. He promised that someday he would teach me how to fly and breathe fire, but I'd have to wait until he was ready to reveal more of his powers. Since then, I've noticed him practicing dragon moves in the backyard, sometimes with a little too much enthusiasm. And every time the weather gets hot, I wonder if he's secretly working on his fire-breathing abilities. Story 28. When my daughter was 6, she had the wildest imagination, and one day, she came to me with a very serious look on her face. Mom, I need to tell you something important, she said. I'm actually a mermaid. At first, I thought she was joking, but then she began to explain in great detail, and I realized she wasn't kidding. I live in the ocean when I'm not here, she told me. I have a beautiful tail, and I swim with dolphins and sea turtles. According to her, she had been living as a mermaid for a long time, but when she was on land, she had to disguise herself as a human. I can still talk to fish, and sometimes I help guide ships safely through the ocean, she said. But my real name is Coral, and I'm a protector of the seas. My job is to keep the ocean clean and safe from pirates who try to steal the treasure. She told me that she had a magical pearl that allowed her to control the tides. I use it to make sure the waves are just right, and I can make it rain whenever I need to, she said, showing me an imaginary pearl she claimed to keep in her pocket. When I asked her how she got her mermaid powers, she said that when she was little, a mystical sea creature came to her and offered her the chance to be a mermaid, as long as she promised to protect the ocean. I agreed, she said, and now I have all these cool mermaid powers, but I can only use them when I'm in water. That's why I'm always at the beach. The best part? She told me that she was planning to visit her underwater kingdom soon, but I wasn't allowed to come because it was too secret. But don't worry, Mom, she said. I'll leave you a seashell so you can visit too one day. I've been waiting for that seashell ever since, but I secretly wonder if she'll ever really take me to see her underwater kingdom. Story 29. When my 7-year-old daughter came to me one evening, she was very solemn. Mom, I need to tell you something important, she said. I thought she had maybe learned something at school, so I sat down with her. What is it? I asked. She took a deep breath and said, I'm actually a superhero, and I've been keeping it a secret. I smiled at her and asked, Really? What's your superhero name? I'm called the Silver Flash, she replied, and I have the power to freeze time. She went on to explain that she discovered her powers one day when she accidentally stopped time while she was getting ready for school. I was brushing my teeth and I just felt really focused and then everything froze. I tried to move, but nothing would work, except for me. I could move as fast as I wanted. According to her, she had been secretly freezing time and saving people from dangerous situations. I've stopped bad guys before, she said, but I can't tell you too much because it's classified. I work with other superheroes and we have a secret headquarters. She explained that she could only freeze time for a short period, so she had to be quick in her missions. I freeze time to save people from accidents, like when I stopped the ice cream truck from tipping over because someone didn't put the brakes on properly, she said, as if it were no big deal. I also freeze time when I need to get things done quickly, like cleaning my room. At this point, I asked her how she could possibly have kept such a big secret from me. Well, I don't want to put too much stress on you, Mom, she said seriously, but I'm always watching out for you. I laughed, but she was so confident that I couldn't help but believe. The next time she ran off to her room, I half expected to see her freezing time to finish her homework, but I guess I'll never know. Story 30. It was a quiet evening, and my 10-year-old son had been acting strangely all day. Normally, he's full of energy, running around the house and getting into mischief. But today, he was quietly sitting in his room, staring at his wall with an intense look on his face. I decided to check on him. As I walked into his room, he turned around and, without any preamble, said, Mom, I need to tell you something important. I sat down next to him, thinking it was just another one of his elaborate stories. He had a knack for dramatic tales, and I was ready for whatever came next. But this time, his eyes were serious, and he spoke with a calm that I had never seen before. I've been to another planet, he said, with all the certainty in the world. I've been there 3 times. I blinked, thinking I had misheard him. What? I asked, trying to keep the disbelief from my voice. I've been to Mars, he continued. It's not what you think. The planet is actually a vacation spot for alien tourists. I went there on a secret mission with a group of explorers from the future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, how did you get there? I asked, barely able to hold back my laughter. He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a whisper. I have a time-traveling spaceship, Mom, he said, as if that was the most obvious thing in the world. It's hidden under the garage. It looks like a regular van, but it has a special engine that lets it go anywhere, time and space included. He explained that the spaceship had been a family heirloom, passed down through generations of secret time travelers. The first time I went, I accidentally ended up on Mars because the spaceship's controls were a bit glitchy, he said, clearly proud of himself. But then I got the hang of it, and I made a second trip with some other kids. We saw the aliens there. They don't look like the ones in the movies. They're kind of like big jellyfish that float around and talk in pictures. It's amazing. I asked him if he had any other cool experiences, and he told me that he had met a robot that could juggle planets and that he had once witnessed a cosmic race between 2 black holes. But I can't tell anyone about it because it's top secret, he said seriously. I didn't know whether to be impressed or concerned, but after that, I found myself eyeing the garage more suspiciously, wondering if he really was sneaking off to explore outer space. Story 31. When my daughter was 5, She came up with a story that I'll never forget. It started on a regular afternoon when she told me that she had to go to the backyard to check on something. I didn't think much of it until she came running back inside with wide eyes. "Mom, you won't believe it," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and urgency. "I just saw a unicorn in our backyard. It was pink with blue wings and it was eating the grass like a cow." I raised an eyebrow, thinking she was just making up a fantastical story. "A unicorn, huh?" I asked, trying not to laugh. "Are you sure it wasn't a horse or maybe a big dog?" "No, Mom, it was definitely a unicorn," she said, her face lighting up with the enthusiasm only a child could muster. It was wearing sparkly sunglasses and it told me that it was on a break from its unicorn job. I couldn't help but ask, "A unicorn job? What kind of job does a unicorn have?" She thought for a moment and then answered with utmost seriousness, "It works as a cloud painter. You know those pretty clouds you see at sunset? Unicorns are in charge of painting them. But this one, her name was Sparkle, was taking a break because she got a little tired from painting the whole sky pink." I was trying to keep a straight face, but my daughter continued with her tale, describing how Sparkle had told her that unicorns could fly, but only when it was time for the sky to turn purple. She said she would come back tomorrow to give me a ride on her wings, but only if I helped her with the painting, my daughter added. At this point, I just had to ask, "How do you help a unicorn paint the sky?" "Easy," she said. "You just need to wave your arms like this and the sky turns any color you want. But you have to be careful, because if you use the wrong color, the sky will turn into a big mess." Of course, the next day I went out to check the backyard, half expecting to see a glowing pink unicorn. No unicorn appeared, but my daughter still swears that Sparkle is out there somewhere, working hard to make the clouds beautiful. And every evening I can't help but look up at the sky and wonder if I'll ever spot a unicorn hard at work.